Veterans Memorial stood silent under the dawn's gray light until Jake's prank turned sacred ground into a viral outrage overnight. Anger exploded, sponsors vanished, and the VA seized his entire channel without warning. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Jake Morrison sat in his dimly lit apartment, scrolling through the latest comments flooding under his prank video. The haunted sign taped crudely onto the smooth granite surface of the Veterans Memorial Stone had seemed like a perfect bait to stir reactions. The prank was simple, Jake's signature blend of dark humor and social experiment. But what he never imagined was the tidal wave of backlash that would crash down on him overnight. For Jake, the memorial was never sacred ground. It was a stage, a backdrop, a prop to fuel engagement. The Veterans Stone, nestled quietly in the town square of Millfield, Ohio, was just another setting where he could provoke. The message on the fake sign read, "Beware, haunted by fallen heroes," dripping with eerie fonts and flickering LED lights. He had expected startled gasps, maybe a few laughs, some startled reactions that would rack up millions of views. Instead, he unleashed a storm. Within hours of posting, comments spiraled from amusement to outrage. "How dare you disrespect our heroes? This isn't a joke. It's sacrilege. You should be ashamed." Jake skimmed through the flood, the tone growing more hostile by the minute. The quiet town of Millfield, usually the backdrop for small-town life videos, had turned into a battleground of fury directed squarely at him. The backlash wasn't just online. Local veterans organizations swiftly condemned the video, condemning Jake's prank as callous and insensitive. What shocked Jake most wasn't the social media storm, but the deeply personal reactions from people who had a stake in the memorial. People like Frank Bennett. Frank Bennett wasn't just any veteran. A retired Marine Corps sergeant, Frank carried the invisible weight of loss daily. His best friend, Tommy Ellis, had fallen in Afghanistan during a fierce firefight years ago. The memorial stone wasn't a mere marker to Frank. It was a solemn testament to Tommy's sacrifice and to the dozens of others who never came home. When Frank saw Jake's video, the initial shock hit like a physical blow. The mocking, haunted sign was more than a tasteless joke. It was a violation of memory, a slap in the face to every soldier's sacrifice etched in that stone. Frank's outrage burned hot. He wasn't one to sit idly by when something so sacred was desecrated. His motivation sprang from a deep personal need to protect that legacy. To him, Jake's prank wasn't just disrespectful, it was a reckless exploitation of grief and honor. He immediately took action, rallying local veterans groups and reaching out through his contacts. This wasn't about social media likes or YouTube subscribers. This was about defending a sacred trust. The conflict quickly escalated beyond Jake's expectations. Sponsors who had once eagerly backed his channel started distancing themselves, wary of being linked to the controversy. PR teams sent terse emails, contracts were terminated, and advertisers vanished. Jake's inbox was a barrage of angry messages and threats, his follower count teetering as many unsubscribed in protest. But the real turning point was something Jake never saw coming: Frank's decision to involve the Veterans Affairs Department. It was an unprecedented escalation, fueled by Frank's resolve and the community's outrage. Within 24 hours, authorities had stepped in and, to Jake's utter disbelief, seized his entire channel, pending investigation. The move was shocking. The VA rarely intervened in digital content disputes, and certainly not with such sweeping power. Jake sat frozen, staring at the notification email confirming the seizure. His mind raced. How could a prank, no matter how tasteless, warrant this kind of federal action? He was stunned. The line between digital fame and real-world consequences suddenly blurred in a harsh, unforgiving way. The channel that had been his livelihood, his identity, his dream was now out of his hands, locked away under the weight of the VA's scrutiny. The city of Millfield simmered with divided emotions. Some called it justice served, Others whispered about freedom of speech. But for Jake and Frank, the collision of their worlds had set in motion a chain of events neither could have predicted. The prank was no longer just a prank. It was a confrontation between respect and recklessness, between fame's hunger and the sanctity of sacrifice. And the fallout had only just begun. Jake Morrison sat alone in the hollow silence of his once vibrant workspace, the soft glow of his computer screen now casting cold shadows across a room stripped of its usual energy. His YouTube channel, the very lifeblood of his existence, had been seized, frozen by the Veterans Affairs Department amid accusations that pierced deeper than he had anticipated. The official statement was stark and unforgiving. Jake was charged with disrespecting a sacred veterans memorial and violating federal policies designed to protect such sites from exploitation and desecration. What had begun as a stunt, meant to garner laughs, had spiraled into a legal nightmare. The penalties loomed ominously: heavy fines, the possibility of permanent bans from digital platforms, and a public stain that threatened to taint every opportunity ahead. The initial wave of fury that had surged through Jake like an adrenaline rush was now replaced by a crushing weight of despair. Anger at the backlash was giving way to something far more profound, a raw, gnawing regret. He replayed the video endlessly in his mind, each frame a reminder that he had crossed an invisible line, one that distinguished irreverent humor from callous disrespect. The memorial stone, once a mere prop in his mental catalog of viral moments, now seemed sacrosanct, etched with stories and sacrifices that dwarfed his ambitions. Yet Jake's fear was no longer solely about legal ramifications or lost income. It was the fracture in the fragile bond with his audience that truly terrified him. His identity, carefully built over years of edgy content and viral moments, now hung in jeopardy. What future remained when the people who had cheered him on now turned their backs in collective condemnation? The algorithm that had once favored his antics was silent, and with it, the validation he craved. His motivation shifted irrevocably, from chasing viral fame to desperately seeking a path to redemption, a way to repair the damage he had inflicted but lacked the roadmap to navigate. Meanwhile, across town, Frank Bennett wrestled with his own turmoil. The retired Marine's initial reaction had been a white-hot fury, a protective instinct ignited by a deep, personal connection to the memorial and those it honored. But as the days wore on and the public storm intensified, Frank's perspective softened, hearing through mutual contacts about Jake's youth and evident ignorance rather than outright malice stirred a quiet compassion within him. Frank understood the difference between willful cruelty and reckless foolishness, and he saw in Jake's downfall not an enemy to be destroyed, but a misguided young man who might yet be reached. Acting on this, Frank extended an olive branch through trusted intermediaries, an invitation for dialogue rather than confrontation. He offered Jake a chance to step beyond the screen and the viral spectacle, to grasp the depth of meaning behind the stone Jake had mocked. It was a calculated risk born from a place of empathy, a moment that could transform resentment into understanding. This overture marked a fragile turning point in a story otherwise saturated with conflict. For Jake, it introduced a faint glimmer of hope amid the wreckage, an opportunity to reconcile with the very community he had alienated, to learn and grow from a mistake that had come with a steep price. The path ahead remained uncertain and daunting, but the possibility of change breathed new life into the despair. In this collision of two worlds, one shaped by sacrifice, memory, and honor, the other by digital fame and impulsive bravado, the fallout was not simply about punishment. It was about the fragile intersections where respect meets recklessness, where youthful error meets enduring legacy. And within that space, the story had shifted from ruin toward a possibility neither Jake nor Frank had foreseen. That understanding might yet emerge from the ashes of outrage. Jake approached the memorial site with a heavy heart, the weight of the past days pressing down like an unrelenting storm. The air was crisp, the kind of early morning chill that sharpened the edges of his thoughts and left no room for escape. Frank Bennett stood nearby, a sturdy figure etched with years of discipline and loss, waiting not as a judge, but as a guide. This meeting was more than a gesture. It was a reckoning. The quiet town, the silent stone, and the stories embedded within that monument were about to reveal truths Jake had never truly understood. Frank began not with accusations or recriminations, but with stories, raw, unfiltered narratives of valor and sacrifice that clung to the air like sacred whispers. He spoke of his best friend, Mark, whose name was etched deep into that granite slab, a young Marine who had faced the chaos of combat with unwavering resolve. Mark's laughter, his dreams, and his final, devastating sacrifice in a faraway land surfaced vividly in Frank's voice, piercing through Jake's defenses. These were not abstract tales or historical footnotes. They were living memories carried by a man who had seen too much loss to forget. As Frank's words wove through the cold morning air, Jake felt a profound shift within himself. The memorial stone was no longer a mere backdrop for a prank, no longer a stepping stone to viral views. It was a monument of grief, honor, and unspoken debts. The realization struck with brutal clarity. The people commemorated here had given everything, their lives a sacred currency that demanded respect beyond any fleeting moment of internet fame. The stark contrast between Jake's careless stunt and the enduring sacrifices it had mocked was now undeniable. This confrontation with truth was a crucible, burning away the arrogance and ignorance that had once fueled Jake's content. The silence that fell between the two men afterward was not empty. It was thick with unspoken understanding and the weight of shared humanity. For Jake, it was a baptism of sorts, a rebirth from the reckless prankster into a humbled witness to the cost of courage. When Jake returned to his channel, he approached it differently. Gone was the brash swagger and calculated edge. Instead, he offered something rare and vulnerable, a heartfelt apology that resonated with sincerity rather than spectacle. His voice trembled as he spoke, acknowledging the pain his actions had caused and expressing genuine remorse. He did not seek forgiveness for the sake of views or redemption as a mere public relations move. He sought to honor the men and women who had given their lives and to transform his platform into a space of education and respect. The response was cautious, but hopeful. Veterans groups, once hostile, began to engage with his content, seeing his newfound dedication as a bridge rather than a barrier. The Veterans Affairs Department, after careful review, lifted the seizure of his channel, recognizing the earnestness of his efforts. Slowly, his audience returned, not just those hungry for entertainment, but a community moved by his transformation and the courage it took to admit fault and commit to change. Jake's journey from mockery to respect was not a simple redemption arc. It was a hard-fought triumph over the damage wrought by thoughtlessness. It was a story that reverberated beyond the digital landscape, a testament to the power of accountability and the possibility of growth even from the most painful mistakes. Through embracing humility, Jake reclaimed his identity, not as a provocateur, but as an advocate, a voice amplifying the sacrifices so many had made in silence. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, the memorial stone stood resolute, its significance no longer obscured by controversy. And Jake Morrison, once a symbol of reckless irreverence, had become a living example of transformation, proof that respect, when embraced sincerely, can lead to profound and lasting triumph.